Segment 5, our final segment, alas. The United States, then Europe. The state in the third millennium, I quote you again, "The model realized by the American Revolution represented a tremendous step forward." And if I stopped there, we would have nothing to discuss. It is fortunate for human history that this democratic state based on the rule of law was so successful in spite of a series of weak points in this Constitution. All right, Your Highness, you have some explaining to do.
Yes.
Our weak points.
Weak points that you have direct democracy only on the local state level, not on the federal level.
But there I think I have you, because we sit in California,
Yes.
where citizens do have resort to a ballot initiative. California is 38 million people. It's a different case from Liechtenstein, but still, it's direct democracy, with the result that the California Constitution is now as thick as a telephone book, and the state is seriously encumbered with contradictory. It's a mess.
It's a mess.
All right.
Yes.
I'm just giving you a little resistance.
Yes.
Carry on with our weak points.
I think one of the weak points in the United States was that the state, the federal state, took over quite a lot of tasks, and I think they made also the mistake to give the indirect taxation to the local states and keep direct taxes for themselves. I think that's not a good system. I think you should do it the other way around. And then I think here again, if the United States would have concentrated the federal state on certain few important tasks which they can do better than the local states or the local communities, then I think the United States would be even in a better position. But I think it's, yes, as you say, there's a tendency with, I call it indirect democracy, but also then with the way how direct democracy is shaped, that you get very complicated laws. If you look at the US laws, it's very huge amounts of laws and very difficult to find your way if you're a normal citizen. You need a lawyer, and even they get lost.
Now, the election that just took place, the Republicans captured more seats in the House of Representatives than in any election in some 7 decades, by my count. Mm-hmm. Some seats, 6 seats in the Senate. Does that strike you as a sign of health? Or, given that the Republicans were just turned out 4 years ago, and that 6, 8 years ago before that, does this strike you as dangerous volatility that you see entering the American system?
It is perhaps a dangerous volatility because I think it shows to a certain degree that people are unhappy with the present system, whoever is really in charge. They were unhappy with the Republicans, they changed over to the Democrats, now they changed back to a certain degree. And I think it's a little bit of a sign that those traditional states are starting to come into a crisis in this age of globalization. Mm. I think the United States are still very well off, no doubt about it. And I'm, well, that I'm sitting here, that's because the Americans saved us during World War II and during the Cold War. So I'm very grateful to them. And still, I think we would be happy if everywhere in the world you would have something like American democracy. Mm. But looking far into the future, I think some reforms should be necessary in the United States, really to be a leading competitive power, which we need, I think, for a long time still in this world, to turn that into that.
All right, to Europe. In the state in the third millennium, you note that whereas the European Court of Justice, quote, finds the time to deal extensively with cases that do not fall within its jurisdiction, close quote, it nevertheless has a backlog of some 90,000 cases that do fall in its jurisdiction. And you also write, quote, that quoting, the Council of Europe loves to give unsolicited advice about human rights and democratic principles, close quote. So what I want to do is get you on the record on the European Union. Is the European project a fundamentally worthy project that's marred by a little too much pomposity and a little too much bureaucracy? Or is it fundamentally a mistake?
I think basically it's a good project. It's like with the United States. They're not as far as the United States. They're not as efficient as the United States. I don't know if they will ever become the United States of Europe. I doubt it. But I think it has a lot of positive sides. But I think there are a lot of problems in there. They have taken up too many tasks. The whole justice system doesn't really work, especially on the European level. I think those are weaknesses which are just there, and I think they will not be able to change easily.
Margaret Thatcher, Europe is a classic utopian project, a monument to the vanity of intellectuals, a program whose inevitable destiny is failure. Close quote. What she was insisting on was the importance of the nation state because of the accountability. She knew who her constituents were. Yeah. The House of Commons, through long history, understands, British people understand whom they are electing, but the European project diffuses accountability. Isn't that almost a fatal objection from your own point of view, your own insistence on democracy?
Well, yeah,
I'm trying to get you to say something really sharp about Europe.
Yeah, I think it's a very dangerous development. But of course, if you look at Eastern Europe and those new members who joined, I think for them it's a big step forward.
Because of the economic integration.
Economic integration, it also gives them a little bit more of a rule of law. They can appeal to courts outside of their countries, which are often stuffed with politicians and are not really applied the rule of law. So I think for them it's an advantage. And economically, of course, it's also an advantage.
Your Highness, my final question, alas, we're out of time. For 1,000 years, Europe led the world, working out the rule of law, giving rise to universities, science, producing perhaps the most magnificent art and music and literature in human history. And to a remarkable extent, your own family, century after century after century, played a central role. What does Europe have left to teach the world today?
I think that the diversity which we have, that we finally are able to live in peace with each other, which was not the case since the fall of Rome. So that's, I think, that we have developed some mechanism that we can live in peace. And I think those lessons can be somehow applied to a certain degree on the whole world. And I think states, they come and go, and usually that's decided with the weapon in the hand. And I think really that you go there and say, okay, let's have democracy. Those things should be decided not with the weapon in the hand on the battlefield, but with the ballot at the ballot box, with the paper at the back, with the vote there. I think that's where Europe, I think, has learned hard lessons over a long period of time. We finally came to the conclusion we have to somehow do it peacefully. We have to have a sort of common market where we can trade peacefully and free movement of goods, services, people to a certain degree. I think that's a lesson which can be applied worldwide.
If you could offer one sentence of advice to Americans, what would you say?
I think the world still needs you how you are.
Thank you. Your Serene Highness, Prince Hans Adam II of Liechtenstein, author of The State in the Third Millennium. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge and the Hoover Institution. Thanks for joining us.